Good afternoon, econ and personal finance students, and welcome to another video on macroeconomics. Today we're going to take a look at property rights and contract law, and specifically we will identify the role that government plays in providing a legal structure to protect property rights and enforce contracts. So the first thing we need to be able to define is what are property rights? Property rights are the laws that define the legal ownership of resources in the U.S. and throughout the world, and how those may be used. Property can be owned by individuals, businesses, or the public, which is another way of saying property owned by the government. Property can include physical, tangible assets, so any physical thing you can actually hold and possess, like land, money, houses, books, electronics, and basically any non-human animals. You cannot treat another human as property in our country. But property can also be more than just physical assets. It can be non-physical or intangible assets. These include ideas, words, artwork, and other thoughts that you came up with. Now, finally, it's important to note that property may be acquired, used, purchased, rented, or sold in our economy. For property rights in the United States, it's important to note that there are two constitutional amendments that specifically protect your right to hold property. The Fifth Amendment states that the federal government cannot deprive you of your life, liberty, or property without going through due process, without going through the courts. And the 14th Amendment extends that right to protect you from state governments as well. Now, there is an instance where federal, state, and local governments may take control of private property from an individual, and this is known as eminent domain. Under eminent domain, government may take control of your property if two conditions are met. First, the use of the property must serve the greater public interest. So the government has to determine and prove that they need this property to serve the greater public interest. Second, the property owner must be appropriately compensated. So they must be paid for that property. A good local example of this for the Williamsburg and Hampton Roads area is the area known as Lackey in Yorktown. Prior to World War II, this area was a settlement for local communities. A bunch of people owned houses here. But during World War II, the government determined that it was necessary to put a submarine base on that land. They decided that it was necessary for our national defense and for everyone's security. So they ended up having to pay all of the property owners to take that land and then put a military base on it, which today is known as Yorktown Naval Weapons Station. Another important type of property law to understand is intellectual property laws. There are three different types of intellectual property: patents, copyrights, and trademarks. You would apply for a patent to protect some sort of idea for an invention or new product that you came up with. So any sort of innovation or invention that you came up with. This is why whenever you see someone pitch a new idea on the TV show Shark Tank, that they always ask the person if they have applied for a patent. The second form of intellectual property protection is copyright. This protects any work of art, which can include songs, films, drawings, stories, movies, even things like building designs. All of those artistic types of works would be protected by copyright. And finally, if you've ever purchased a t-shirt or some sort of article of clothing with a brand name on it, you would probably notice next to that brand name a little TM, which stands for trademark. Trademarks protect images, logos, terms, and products, and even things like slogans and jingles associated with a particular brand. So any logo, any jingle, any slogan, and even a lot of the products and images associated with a brand are protected by trademarks. The next topic we want to look at, moving away from property rights, is looking at enforcing contracts and why that's so important for the government to do. Contracts are binding agreements that outline a business transaction. Basically, one party agrees that it will do one thing, and another party agrees that it will do another thing. Contracts are very important because they basically serve as the basis of settling legal disputes and disagreements between different parties. All right, we have a system of law rather than one person going to another person's house and shooting them up when there's a disagreement. Instead, they go to court and they analyze the contract. In the United States of America, your right to enter into contract with other parties is protected by the Contract Clause of the Constitution, which is in Article 1, Section 10. The last function of government we'll take a look at in this video is antitrust legislation. Antitrust legislation are laws designed to break up monopolies and oligopolies, or at least to force them to behave more competitively. So the government uses these types of laws and lawsuits if they determine that any one company or small group of companies has gained too much power in a particular industry. They do this to ensure that consumers have choices and to make sure businesses don't have too much power over prices in the economy. Some classic examples of this were the breakup of the Standard Oil Company, so John D. Rockefeller's company. It was broken up in the year 1911. So fun fact, some of you may not know that BP and ExxonMobil all used to be actually the same brand. They used to be all owned under the same company. Also, AT&T and Verizon used to be owned by just AT&T. It was in the year 1984 that the government broke up AT&T because they determined that that company had too much power over the telephone industry. And finally, Microsoft used to have much more control over the personal computer industry. For a while, they were the only ones offering PCs out to people. In the year 2000, elements of Microsoft's company were forced to be broken up. So that really wraps up this video on these different topics. Make sure you go back and get the notes covered, and if you have any questions, please let me know. So long, folks.